when you took off, you take off at some big old dirt field, and you get 200 or 300 airplanes revving them engines up there. You had a regular dust storm. In the middle of the day, just like foggy weather, you couldn't see anything. You just taking off on a prayer. And after you got in the air, we're flying in formation. Was quite a show for a transport pilot, because they wasn't trained to do that day in and day out. The bomber command flew in formation, but we very seldom did. And it was quite a job. And after you got over there and dropped it to troopers, well, coming up out of it, you'd sort of scatter, and you might be right by yourself for a good little while, and then you would assemble in some sort of a formation on the way back. But actually, the fear of the enemy, you very seldom thought about it. It was sort of the day of the drop was sort of a climax. You wanted to get it over with. You'd been on all that training deal, and it was getting sort of hard to take, and you want to get it over with so you can get back in your regular routine, flying up and down the country, and hitting all in big towns, and spending the night in them, and running around and seeing the world. So, looking back on it, well, I just don't guess I was old enough or had sense enough to have any real fear of anything. Now, the biggest job on a parachute drop, I thought, was getting all of those airplanes assembled and ready for the paratroopers to load and get ready to take off. You know, the crew chief moved the airplane on the ground when the pilots wasn't there. And in a situation like that, well, we had to taxi those airplanes out to the takeoff position, loading position out there. And man, it was a big traffic jam. You done it all by radio. After the invasion of Sicily, we started supplying those armies over there high priority stuff and evacuating the wounded, special cases. And we done that work over there a month or so. That Sicilian campaign didn't take very long. A month or so, it was all over. We were stationed there in Tunisia still, and making flights in different directions. We was doing all 4 directions then. One good thing about the troop carrier man, the pilots had complete charge of the aircraft in flight and on the ground. And we very seldom flew with more than 1 or 2 airplanes in a flight. Very seldom 2. Generally just 1 airplane going somewhere. And when you got there, well, the pilot was under sort of standard instructions to go back to his unit. And couldn't anybody hijack you and say, do this and do that. Of course, a general officer could do anything, but it was pretty well organized. And after we took a flight somewhere, well, it was up to the pilot where he went from there. And those pilots are pretty sharp. It was a big war over there. There was a lot to do and a lot to see. There were good jobs and good and bad jobs. And they were pretty crafty about it. And we got to see a lot of the country. And the Army, the Air Force, I thought was pretty lenient about letting the soldiers see the historical sites around the world over there. If you went pretty close to some historical place, well, they'd arrange for you to have some time there to look it over. Now, I don't know if that came down from the high command or on the local level, but if we got pretty close to anything, we looked it over pretty good. In the late summer to fall of 1943, we moved our whole outfit over to the island of Sicily. We were stationed at a little town named Comiso, is right near a larger town of Ragusa. It was on the southern part of that island, about the middle ways, and we started flying out of there. It was a nice country, Sicily. Looking back on it, it was probably one of the best places and prettiest all over that I'd ever been. It was a hilly country, mountainous. They had a big volcano there, Mount Etna, over there on that west coast near the city of Catania. And it was a real pretty country. And the people were friendly. And we had some good times over there off the base. And they had wonderful food. And they grew grapes, olives, and fruits. And it was one of the best parts of the world that I was ever in. And along about that time, we took these islands of Corsica and Sardinia, and we started getting in on that MAP service, Military Air Transport Command, they had over there. They had flags everywhere. And generally, every squadron would keep one or two airplanes on that flag all the time. And the rest of them were just going here and there. Or we still had our training missions going on. We had a lot of training to do, training pilots mostly. Blind flying, instrument flying, takeoff and landings and stuff like that. We didn't just sit around. We was always in the air if the airplanes went out of commission. And we had some pretty good mechanics. And department heads were first class. And we got in a lot of flying over there in Sicily. I was still assistant crew chief for Sergeant Marley D. Warren from Pocatello, Idaho. And it sent Sergeant Warren home. The war was over for him. They sent all of the original crew chiefs home. Now, they had took those airplanes when we first got them over there in West Oldfield, Massachusetts, in July 1942. And they island hopped them over to England, up to Canada, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, Iceland, Greenland, on over to England. And they made the invasion of North Africa, and they made the invasion of Sicily, and they sent those boys home. About the only way you could get to go home. In fact, nobody ever thought about going home. Just all of a sudden, they sent them home, and they gave my airplane to a Sergeant Beeson, and I was just crew chief for him. And things had got pretty well organized around there then. And Sergeant Beeson, he looked at things about like Sergeant Warren did. We figured if we kept a good trim airplane, good and clean, good supply of groceries, and we're going to get some of them good pilots, and we did. And the next few months, we stayed on that MATS run, that passenger run. You'd start out down there on the west coast of Africa, in Prince Morocco. There's a big naval base down there, an airfield called Port Lildy. It was down the coast from Casablanca. You'd fly in there and spend the night. Early the next morning, I guess all them big boats and maybe some airplanes come in there from the States. And we'd load up different things. High priority mail, VIPs, very important people, civilian passengers, our officers, replacement officers, mostly fighter and bomber pilots. And we'd take off. And our first stop would be Casablanca. And we would manage to spend the night in all of these towns, different towns. It was just sort of up to the pilot. You're just flying along that one airplane. It's just like on airline service over here. And say you'd land there in Casablanca. Well, they had security for that airplane, and they'd send you into town, and they had you a room reserved there in one of the biggest hotels in town. And they'd put you up for the night, and you'd eat down there in their restaurant. It didn't cost you nothing. Well, you got first-class accommodations. That was for those match crews. And you'd get transportation back out to the field next morning, and you'd take off, and your next stop would be Oran. It'd be over there in Algeria. And from Oran, you'd beat it on up to Algiers in Algeria. And sometimes, depending on what our cargo was, we might fly into Blida, which is about 30 miles from there, where we stationed. We all had friends around there. Of course, we made friends everywhere we went. We hit the ground. We had someplace to go. But from Algiers, you would go to Tunis. From Tunis, you would fly over to the island of Sicily, over there on the west coast, Catania. From Catania, you'd go on to the east coast, to Palermo. And that was a hard place to get in and out of. The pilots, they didn't like that stop. They didn't like to go in there, and I didn't either. The town of Palermo was right up on a high plateau, just a flat spot on top of a mountain, and right on the coast, sea coast. And if you come in from the landing field, it seemed like all those fields over there was right on the edge of a mountain or a sea coast. And you come in from the sea there, and just a short distance from the runway, it dropped off right down there. Oh man, it must have been 200 or 300 feet right down. More jagged rocks down there in that Mediterranean Sea. And on the other side of the runway was the town, and a range of mountains there on three sides. And the wind was blowing in there constantly, all the time, day and night. And you could just land one way, and you had to take off the same way. You'd come in over that water, and just hope you'd get stopped before you run into that town. And you took off. You just hope you get up in the air before you hit the mountains. Well, I take off from Palermo. You'd go to the island of Corsica. It's the city of Ajaccio. Now, that's where Napoleon was born. I went to the house up there and saw where he was born and all that. And like I say now, we'd spend the night in all of these towns. Of course, not the same one all the time. We left Corsica, we'd go to the island of Sardinia. And from Sardinia, we'd go back to Catania, Sicily. And we'd, a little bit later on, after the armies got over into Italy, and well on up the coast, we'd fly into Naples, and then across the other side of the boot there to the town of Bari. Sometime we'd fly into one of the airfields at Foggia. They had sort of a complex of airfields around there. Foggia, Maine, 1, 2, 3, and 4. From there, we might stop off at Toronto. Never remember spending the night there. Cut on across from Toronto, and we go back to Tunis. And we'd leave Tunis. We'd go to Tripoli, down in Libya. And then we'd go on down to Benghazi, still in Libya. From there, we'd make a flight to Cairo, Egypt. And that was a pretty long flight from Benghazi to Cairo. So we'd spend the night there, and sometimes a couple of nights. And we'd run around and see everything there. Went out and saw the big pyramids. and the Sphinx. I went all through that big pyramid. Walked up in there and went up in there as far as you could go. And had my picture taken out there on a camel out there in front of that Sphinx. This guide we had asked me if I wanted to have some pictures made. I told him I hadn't got time. He said, "Oh, we send them home for you." I said, "Don't you know there's a war going on?" He said, "We send them home." And I did. I had a picture made of me sitting on that camel with them pyramids and the Sphinx in the background. And I think I bought a half dozen of them. I just thought I'd throw my money away. But they got home all right. Well, we'd leave Cairo. We'd beat it back down the countryside. Just as few stops as possible. Of course, we'd have to hit Benghazi, Tripoli, and Tunis on the way back. And we go back on down to Port Leota and start all over again. Now, one round trip like that, depending on the weather and what kind of pilots we had, a lot of them would rather party than fly. A round trip take you about 10 days or 2 weeks. And man, I'm telling you, that was the preferred job. There was a couple of things that happened while I was on that job. We come out of Oran one morning, going up the coast there to Algiers. We had a load of replacement fighter pilots. They had just got out of flight school, been commissioned, and they sent them over as replacements. We must have had maybe 12, 15 of them, and they was laying back there in that cargo compartment and laying around and taking it easy. It was a pretty monotonous flight up through there. You're going to be flying maybe 2 or 3 hours, and you get up, fairly high, and maybe not any clouds, and you can't see the ground moving. Monotonous flying. Oh, it was real monotonous like that. So we generally the pilots would do a little something to break the monotony, and one of them was to get down what we call head topping, get down real low on the ground, fly along. And this time we was going up that coast, and he got down pretty low on the ground, and the pilot pretty proud of himself. Boy, pretty low flying there, And he happened to look back there, and one of them guys was propped up there on his elbow looking out. And I don't know whether he done it on purpose or not, but just that pilot looked back there, yawned, and that sort of browned that pilot off. Said, "I'll show that so-and-so." So, boy, he really got down on the ground. I'm telling you, you come to a fence, you'd have to pull up to come over. And he went along like that for a few minutes, and finally that officer, he got up, and he come up there, and he knocked on the door. The pilot looked back there, and this guy, he took his cap off, and he saluted, and he got down on his knees, and he says, Mr. Boss Man, says, I apologize. Well, we got a big kick out of that, and we raised back up a little bit, got a little higher. But another time, it was along about the same part of the country there, which flying along there, we was up pretty high. We had some altitude, and I'd been laying back there asleep. Well, I got up, and I walked up there, and the cockpit, I was standing there behind the pilot, co-pilot, there in the companionway. The pilot, over on the left-hand side, he's sitting there, looked like he's asleep. The airplane on automatic pilot. Co-pilot sitting over there, he sort of relaxed, but he had his eyes open, looking straight ahead. He might have figured out a way to sleep like that, I don't know. But I looked out, looked around there in front of us, and I looked out over there to the right-hand side, and boy, my heart just sank. There was a little airplane flying out there just right off of our wingtip. The prettiest little old black airplane you ever did see. And I could see that pilot sitting there looking at me. And I looked back there, and there's one of these great big old black and white swastikas on the tail of that airplane. The German airplane sitting there flying right along the sides. Well, boy, I tapped that co-pilot on the shoulder. He looked at me, and I pointed out there. And he looked over there, and when he did, boy, he he got a hold of that wheel, and he pulled it over in a left flank, and we started down towards the ground. And when we come out sort of level, I got up there in that little Astrodome, looked back. I could see just a little old black speck way back behind us. He was going the other way just fast as he could. And we figured out what happened was that it was a little old reconnaissance plane, photographic, or maybe a fighter, a pursuit or something that had run out of ammunition, or he took pity on us. But we figured he'd just sitting out there taking a picture of us, and or maybe just want to see how long he could fly on there without disturbing us. But that was the only time that I've seen a German airplane. Well, about this time they got all set for the invasion of Italy, and we started training for it. And along about the time it was supposed to happen, I think on the very day that the ground forces invaded Italy, well, Italian government surrendered. They took themselves out of the war officially, and they canceled our parachute drop. We were gonna drop paratroopers over in there someplace, but we didn't drop them, and we went on back to our regular routine of work. And we worked in Italy over there, flying supplies in and out when they'd made some beachheads there at Anzio and Salerno and over in Tirana. We flew in and out of those places during the early part of that campaign and evacuated some of the wounded, but we didn't take too big a hand in that deal. Most of the time we were working back down in North Africa and the Middle East down there. Things rocked along to about the early part of April in 1944. I was on this passenger run down there in the Met service, and we got instructions to come back to our squadron. We very seldom hit a squadron until we had a major inspection due, because they'd liable to pull us off the run. But we got orders to go back. We went in there to Comiso in Sicily, and our outfit, our air echelon, was packing up. They were going to send our whole group and part of another group to the country of India. And man, that was a big deal. And we started putting auxiliary fuel tanks in those airplanes. And man, that cargo department just full of fuel tanks. And we took off just our air echelon. They said we was coming back, and we did. But we left Sicily there, and we must have made one stop. We went to Cairo, Egypt. We might have made one stop on the way, refueling, but I don't think we did. And we left Cairo, Egypt. We flew to the city of Tehran in Iran, and we sat down there and refueled. We didn't leave the airfield. But I remember on the way over there, we flew over the city of Baghdad in Iraq. And I was laying back there asleep. I remember it very well. And a co-pilot come back there and said, Charlie, said, we need some help up here. Said, we need some scanners. I said, what do you mean scanners? He said, there's things flying around up here. We don't want to hit none of them. And he said, come on up here and I'll show you. And I went on up there in the cockpit and looked out. I didn't see nothing flying around. I said, what are you talking about? He said, don't you see that flying carpet coming down there with that fellow sitting on it? And he said, no, seriously. He said, look right down there. That's the city of Baghdad. You've heard about Baghdad. I said, yes, sir. He said, well, that's it. He said, I knowed you. Wouldn't want to miss that. Well, we refueled at Tehran, and our next stop was Karachi, India. They're on the west coast. It's a country of Pakistan now. We had to check in there and get all of our shots and everything. And we left Karachi. We flew to Agra. up in the north central part of the country. That's where that famous landmark, the Taj Mahal, is there. Well, on the way back, we got a chance to see that. But from Agra, we flew on up in Upper Assam. It was way up in the northeastern part of India, there on the Tibet and the Burma border. And we were flying supplies over into Burma, out of India. We go up to this airfield in town of Lido, right there on the border, where that Lido road took off down through there. The American engineers was building a new road to hook up with the Burma road. They called it the Lido road, the Stillwell road later on. And we were flying supplies over there into the jungle. General Stillwell and Merle's Marauders was over there fighting those Japs. The Japs had broke out of Burma and come over into India. And this big, this supreme commander over there, Lord Mountbatten, an Englishman, he needed some air transportation, and he borrowed us. 79 airplanes, they said. And we flew over there, and we liberated the airfield of Mishinov over in Burma, which was a turning point in that campaign over there. And we flew troops in there and supplies, and we would airdrop supplies over there in the jungle. Some of them had parachutes on them, and some of them didn't. It mostly just rice. They'd take about maybe a 50, 60-pound bag of rice and in a sack, and then put another sack around it a little bit bigger, and then another sack a little bit bigger around that one. And we had these quartermaster guys that go along with us, and we'd get down low and make a run at a target they had down there, and they'd just kick that rice out the door. And sometimes that first bag, would break, and generally did in that second bag, or the third one, would generally catch the rice. Well, it was a strange country over there in India, and I got plenty of time to run around the countryside and see what's going on. And I went around to all them little villages and everything, and went into Calcutta and New Delhi. Oh, we didn't stay over there but 2 months. And when that the monsoon started over there, and got real bad, well, we left there and came back to Sicily. And on the way back, we flew along that Russian border there in Iran. Now, looking on the map, since then, we left Agra in India. We went over to see the Taj Mahal. And then, I don't know if we cut back down to Karachi or not. And according to that map, if we went straight across and flew alongside that Russian border, and those pilots told me 2 or 3 times to look out over there, that's Russia. And we sort of made a little detour there, or we either flew right over the country of Afghanistan. And at that time, they were neutral. They stayed neutral all during that war. But they had the Allies all around them: Russia, China, India, and Iran was Iraq neutral right up to the end. But they were occupied by the Russians and the British and Americans. But anyhow, we got to over in India and Burma. We were flying within sight of China. Them pilots told me a lot of times that that stuff we just dropped out there, said we dropped that in China. And flying back over there to Tehran, they said that we could see Russia over there. So that's a good thing to look back on, see all them places. And on the way back, we stopped in Palestine, there at the capital of Tel Aviv. Had a big airfield out there. And we stopped off there, and we stayed about 3 days. And I spent all of that time going through the Holy Land. They had regular guided tours. And there was no frontiers over there then, no borders. You go anywhere you wanted to. And I believe that it was a Kiwanis Club tour guide I went on. Went on everything around there. Went to Bethlehem and stood there and looked at the very spot that Christ was born. Went to the Mount of Olives, Sermon on the Mount, and all those places around there. And then went into the city of Jerusalem, and we walked up this hill. They said it was the very route that Christ had carried the cross up there. Got up on top. Well, they showed us where he was crucified, as near as they could figure out. And we left the Holy Land. I had quite a few little excursions around Tel Aviv there. I met a lot of people that turned out to be pretty good friends later on in letters, which corresponded. Well, we went on back to Sicily. We got back to Sicily in the latter part of June 1944. Soon after we got back to Sicily, we moved our whole outfit over to Rome, Italy. We were stationed at Ciampino Airport. It's about 5 to 6 miles out of Rome. They had a big field there, and we were quartered down in some nice stone barracks. The city of Rome was a wonderful place. I run around all over it, day and night. Some of the most beautiful women in the world right there. It's along about on a dividing line. The northern Italians over there, a lot of them are light-skinned people, blondes, especially the women. And then the further south you get, the darker and greasier they get. Right along in there was where they intermingled. And boy, there were some beautiful women there. And I spent a week over on the Isle of Capri. The Air Force had a rest camp over there. And I took all of that in. And boy, I could tell you some tales. And I did in my other tapes. Soon after we got to Rome, Italy, we started training for another parachute drop. But this one was different from the rest of them. In our training program, we didn't drop the paratroopers out. We would just fly over to a big field along an hour or so before dark, and all of the paratroopers would come out with all their equipment and everything and load on the airplanes, and we would take off. And naturally, the first time, we thought it was the real thing, because didn't nobody ever tell you anything in the Army. And like I say, there was no newscast, 5 o'clock news, anything like that. And we'd fly around 2 or 3 hours, and then we'd come back and land there, and those guys would get out and get in their trucks and leave. And the next evening, it'd be the same thing. And then that went on for maybe a week, 10 days. And they told me was that those Germans, they knew that we was going to make an invasion over there in France, but they didn't know exactly where or when. And every time we'd take off like that, well, of course, they'd have word of it, and they'd move the armies around, either in or out, sort of kept them on the move. But finally we did drop paratroopers. Now, I'd got me an airplane about the time we got to back from India. Well, I got me a job as crew chief on an airplane. Had one of my own. So on August 15th, 1944, we made the invasion of southern France. And I was engineer on one of the airplanes. And we dropped our troopers there on the French Riviera, a town of La Maze. And reading about it later on, all the big shots said it was most a perfect operation during the entire war. Well, it was a pretty uneventful, just a preparation, like I say, was the most thing. But what I remember about it most, it was just before daylight. It was about 4:30 in the morning. We dropped those troopers, and it was the moonlight. And going in, we flew in over the water. And they had that Navy, all in boats, the invasion force, going in, and we flew in over them. And we could see them going in there. And we dropped their paratroopers and scattered, and we got reassembled in a flight. We had one of our airplanes was missing, and we didn't know what happened to it. But that was one of the biggest disappointments in my lifetime up to that time. But we just flying on there, radio silence, everything. We was going to refuel there on the island of Corsica. We did. But before we got to Corsica, well, we was flying along there with, boy, it was a heavy heart. We didn't know who it was, which airplane it didn't make it. And all those guys, you know, were just like brothers. There was a certain thing about war buddies over there. It's sort of hard to understand. But I kept looking around. I'd get up in that little Astrodome top airplane. And finally, I saw the little speckle way over there, boy, get bigger and bigger. And finally checked in with our lost airplane. And that was one of the most two beautiful sights that I'd ever seen in my life. And the other one, the most beautiful sight, wasn't very far from there. It was the sun setting over that Mediterranean Sea over there when I was on that Isle of Capri one evening. And I'm telling you, them clouds and that water, it was just unbelievable for just an old country boy like me. Well, we made that invasion of southern France. Everything went just like clockwork. And soon after that, we moved our air echelon over to southern France. We were down in the southern part, a little ways up, at a city we called Estris. I think the French people pronounced it a little bit differently. Well, we were supplying those armies up in there, and we stayed over there until the early part of December. And the Allies had worked their way up almost into Luxembourg. And we'd fly down there to that big port city of Marseille, and we'd load up the different things, and we'd climb up there as far as we could up toward the front lines. And then we'd unload and we'd put up them litter racks on our airplane and evacuate those wounded hospital patients. We'd fly them back down to North Africa, those big hospitals down there at around Oran. Then we'd fly back and make the rounds again. But I had a big time over there in France. I had assistant crew chief. He was a brother to my first crew chief, named Marshall Warren, the brother to Marley. And me and him worked together real good. And we took turns about flying on the airplane. And when you wasn't flying, well, you didn't have nothing to do. It was a 24-hour job with two men taking care of it. You had no other duties. So it made it mighty convenient. And I run around the countryside there. Boy, I saw everything. And on our flights, we managed to stop off in all those big towns. Dijon, Lyons. Spent a couple of nights in Paris. And I just saw that country good. Well, it was about the early part of December. They sent my airplane back to the squadron there at Rome. And I don't remember if all them airplanes went back or not, but I think they did. And I stayed around Rome there just a short time. They sent my airplane over to one of the airfields near Foggia, over in the eastern part of Italy. Just the one airplane. And we were assigned to attach an outfit over there, a sort of an air sea rescue outfit. And they would do different things. They would fly around at Adriatic Sea over there and pick up and spot those guys that bail out of them bombers coming back from them flights over there into Germany, Romania. They had them big bombers coming out of North Africa and southern Italy. And they'd fly over there and they'd get all shot up. And on the way back, a lot of them crews have to bail out. And most of them over there in Yugoslavia. And we had OSS agents over in there, CIA now. And we dropped them over in there a year or so before. Well, these agents would gather up them guys. And those people in there would protect them and hide them out. And every once in a while they'd get a plane load of them. Well, they'd send an airplane over there to pick them up, C-47. A whole flight, maybe 3 or 4 airplanes in one flight would go there and pick those fellas up. Those people over there would make some kind of little makeshift landing field. You'd fly in there. Wouldn't even kill your engine. Just open the door and them guys pile in there, and you'd take them back to Italy. And on them flights you had a P-38 escort. There'd be about 16 of them P-38s buzzing around you all the time over there and back. And they was right with you till you got back to that Italian coast. Now, about the time I got over there, they started that Battle of the Bulge over there in Belgium and Luxembourg. And we were out of that. We were over there in Italy. And I couldn't hardly understand why we was over there, because I had a pretty high-ranking crew. And I think that they were just browsing around, dressing up their service records. And but it was pretty dangerous work over there too, just according to how you looked at it. Now, one time I flew into Belgrade, Yugoslavia. There'd been a B-25 airplane downed over there, and we took an engine over there. And that was right just soon after they had drove those Germans back out what you might call north of Belgrade. Now I'm going to backtrack just a little bit. After we left France and came back, well, we made a flight over into Athens, Greece. They said that we was taking Prime Minister Churchill's party over there. And we did. We had a load of Englishmen with their gear and everything. And later on, I think Churchill did go over there Christmas Day. But I think he went over there on one of them English battleships. Well, I spent a night there in Athens, and the Germans had just been driven out of there. There wasn't any an American personnel around there. Just some Englishmen and those guerrillas. Well, I went into more detail on other tapes about Athens. So I'll get back over here. Where's the flying out of Boji? Now, on one of those flights over into Yugoslavia, we flew out, we taxied out to the runway one afternoon to take off on the flight. And we were sitting there on a taxi strip, waiting to our turn to take off. And there were some airplanes that coming in and taking off. And we were sitting there, and right up on the first row from the runway, there were some airplanes parked there. And then there was a taxi strip right in behind them, which we were on. And then there were some more airplanes parked there and another taxi strip and so on. Well, we were sitting on that first taxi strip nearest the runway, and we were going to taxi on down to our right and then take off to our left. Well, we were sitting there, and there was an airplane that came out there to take off. And it was a C-47 airplane just like ours. But it had Canadian markings on it. It was a Canadian airplane. Well, he took off, and just about the time that he got in the air, well, we saw a lot of black smoke coming out of one of his engines. And he hadn't even pulled his wheels up yet. And he wasn't up very high. And over in front of him, there was a town over there. Well, this airplane circled to his left. And I jumped up there on top of the airplane and was watching him through that little bubble up there. And he circled on around to his left. And he was trying to gain altitude, but he couldn't do it. He had engine trouble. One of them probably out. And he come on down behind us, and I watched him. And he went on back down to our right. And the ground fell off back down there. There was a big valley. And the airplane went down in there and went out of sight. Well, I figured that was it, but I kept looking. And then all of a sudden, I see him come back up. But he was on the far right of the runway. He was trying to make the runway, but he wasn't going to make it. He was too far off to the right. Well, he come on in, and he landed on that first taxi strip on the other side, which was just like ours. There was airplanes parked over there. And he was going right down that taxi strip, and he was hitting airplanes with his wingtips on each side, coming and going. When he got down almost on the ground, well, it was too hard to see him very plain. You could just see the airplanes that he was knocking out of the way. And then he went on down, and just before he stopped, he come out in my plain sight, and I could see him. And the escape hatch on top flew off, and there was two guys jumped out of there and got on the ground. Now, on them Canadian airplanes, they just had a crew of two, a pilot and a co-pilot. Well, I just thought, well, they all got out. And about that time, that airplane started exploding. It seemed like it might have been loaded with ammunition or something.